Welcome to Crimes Beyond Borders, where we'll bring you the most thrilling true crime stories every single day. If you're fascinated by mystery, intrigue, and the darker side of human nature, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us as we unravel the most shocking and perplexing criminal cases from around the world. The story is about to begin after this intro.
From city streets to far-off lands, mystery slipping through our hands. Crimes beyond borders they speak, voices strong but words are meek. Every story leaves a mark, whispers softly in the dark.
Our stories at first are made for ourselves, to comfort us, to help us sleep, and to learn. Along the way, they become a part of our journey, teaching us English and fueling our passion for true crime. So, listen carefully, and if you're about to sleep, close your eyes. Let's begin.
The Symphony of Shadows. The city at night was a different beast, alive with electric veins and distant whispers. It was a landscape of motion, shimmering reflections of neon signs rippling in the puddles left by the late rain. To Marcus, this was where he felt most at home. Under the cover of darkness, where faces were turned away and footsteps echoed down alleyways like unanswered questions, he could breathe. He moved like a shadow, shifting with the cadence of a city that never truly rested. Marcus had been here for nearly 5 years, drifting from one forgotten corner to another, an invisible thread in the tapestry of urban life. His work as a freelance researcher kept him cloaked in the anonymity he cherished. He was the quiet tenant who paid rent on time, the man with a collection of books that spanned philosophy, history, and anatomy. To those who encountered him, Marcus was a curiosity, a loner, eccentric but harmless. But behind the thick curtains of his apartment, in the silence that he ruled over, he was something else entirely. The origin of obsession. Her name was Leah, and Marcus first noticed her in the library, tucked in the science wing where no one ventured past dusk. She sat at the far end, headphones over her ears, eyes locked on her laptop, as she scribbled notes in the margins of an old medical journal. Her focus was absolute, the world beyond her screen fading into irrelevance. Marcus watched her for minutes that felt like hours, the cadence of her movements syncing with the steady beat of his heart. Leah was a graduate student, a fact he learned through eavesdropping on conversations with her peers. She studied neurological disorders, speaking passionately about brain structures and the mystery of consciousness. Marcus found himself drawn not only to her intellect, but to the quiet moments when she let her guard down. A half smile at a joke only she understood, the way she tugged at her sleeves when deep in thought. He followed her without being seen, noting her routines, late nights at the library, morning runs along the canal, a preference for black coffee, and the dim corner booth at a cafe called Hearth and Vine. Every detail was important, a piece of the puzzle he was assembling in the silence of his mind. The blueprint of control. Marcus's apartment transformed into a war room. His corkboard, once filled with newspaper clippings and scrawled research notes, became an altar dedicated to Leah. A map of the city was pinned in the center, marked with her known locations, routes, and habits. Strings of red thread connected the dots, forming a web that only he could decipher. The idea took shape, a plan so precise that any deviation felt like an affront. He knew that mistakes were for the reckless, for those driven by impulse rather than purpose. Marcus's intent was different. It was an experiment, a way to understand the shift between control and chaos, to dissect that moment when power slips from grasp and becomes something else entirely. He chose an old tenement building scheduled for demolition, its broken windows gaping like the eyes of a corpse. It was perfect, isolated, quiet, and forgotten. The night of reckoning. The night was dense with fog, blurring the lines between pavement and sky, muffling the city's distant growl. Marcus moved through the mist, gloved hands tucked into the pockets of his dark coat, the chill biting through the fabric, but not touching the heat that surged within him. He waited by the park where Leah's route curved before heading into quieter streets, where lamplight faltered and the world held its breath. She appeared at 9:47 p.m., right on time. Marcus's pulse quickened, not from fear but from anticipation. He shadowed her at a careful distance, matching the rhythm of her steps. When she turned into the narrow street leading toward her apartment, Marcus made his move. His approach was silent, a sudden rush, as he stepped behind her and pressed the cloth over her mouth and nose. The struggle was brief. Leah's eyes went wide, the realization sparking before fading into darkness. He caught her as she slumped, a marionette with its strings severed. The tenement building welcomed them with its empty corridors, the scent of mold and dust clinging to the damp air. Marcus set her in the chair at the center of the room, binding her wrists and ankles with nylon rope. The lanterns he'd placed around cast a sickly glow, throwing jagged shadows that danced on the peeling wallpaper. The dance of power. Leah stirred, head rolling forward as she blinked against the harsh light. The confusion in her eyes sharpened into fear as she took in her surroundings, the binds at her wrists, the figure standing a few feet away. Marcus watched her with a cold, detached interest, cataloguing each flicker of emotion. Why? The question tumbled from her lips, shaking with disbelief. Marcus didn't answer. He tilted his head, as if considering the question, and took a step forward. He lifted a scalpel, its blade slender and gleaming. This wasn't about violence for its own sake. It was about precision, the slow unveiling of truth beneath the surface. The first cut was shallow, tracing the line of her collarbone, just enough for her to feel the cold kiss of metal. Her breath quickened, eyes wide and glistening. But then, something unexpected happened. Leah's gaze steadied. The initial panic gave way to a defiance that Marcus had not anticipated. She locked eyes with him, unyielding, and whispered, "You're not as strong as you think." The words struck him like a blow, shattering the silence in his mind. He paused, the scalpel hovering in the air, his chest tightening as the room shifted around him. The balance of power had wavered, teetered, and he felt it slipping. The crumble of control. In that instant, the years of carefully constructed walls began to crack. The meticulous notes, the rituals of planning, the way he measured every aspect of his life to avoid the chaos, none of it mattered. Leah had pulled at a thread he didn't know existed, unraveling something deep within him. His hand shook, and the scalpel fell from his grip, clattering to the floor in a sound that reverberated like a gunshot. The room seemed to close in, the air thickening, pressing against him until he could barely breathe. He stepped back, heart pounding with a rhythm that no longer felt like his own. Leah watched him, the defiance softening to something unreadable, a mix of exhaustion, pain, and understanding. "Leave," she said, not as a plea but as a command. And Marcus did, stumbling back into the cold corridor, and through the yawning front doors of the building, out into the city that now felt foreign and strange. The collapse. The fog swallowed him as he ran, each step echoing down the alleyways until he reached his apartment, breathless and shaking. He locked the door behind him, leaning against it as if it were the only thing keeping the world out. The silence was deafening, no longer comforting but accusatory. The faces on the corkboard stared back at him, empty eyes filled with questions that mirrored his own. Leah survived. The morning news spoke of her escape, her quiet refusal to share details with the authorities beyond what was necessary. The police scoured the tenement building, finding traces of the scene he'd left behind. But they wouldn't find him. Marcus knew how to disappear. It was the only thing he was certain of now. But as days turned into weeks, the void within him deepened, a gnawing absence that the ritual could never fill again. Leah's defiance haunted him, the echo of her voice in the moments before he fled. She had stripped away the veneer of his control, revealing the fear that had always lived beneath it. And so, Marcus became a ghost in the city he once dominated, haunted not by what he'd done, but by the unraveling that came when the illusion of control shattered. The labyrinth was no longer the streets and alleys he navigated with ease. It was inside him, a maze of echoes and silences he could never escape.
The story has come to an end, but stay relaxed. If you feel yourself drifting off to sleep, just let the video play and enjoy the soothing music in the background. Let it guide you gently into rest. We'll be here, bringing you more stories every night. Sleep well, and see you tomorrow at 8 p.m.
It whispers, cities asleep, mystery in the air, it seeps. Flickering lamps dimly glow, secrets hidden where few will go. In the half-light truth begins to show, unseen forces pull and tow. Windows shut, curtains drawn tight, lonely figures melt in the night. Echoes fade out of sight, moonlight bathes the world in fright. Ticking clocks, relentless sound, time slips when danger's around. In the shadows, lost and found, haunting silence so profound.